So you clean up the water supply, and once you do that, then you get control over the infection as to wherever it was. Another thing that they look at is when does this particular illness occur? Is it seasonal or is it yearly? So seasonal would be based on obviously a particular season. So say flu season, cold season, things like that. We know that for us in the wintertime, those common illnesses are going to be occurring. Whereas something maybe on a yearly basis, um, in which they might as well do vaccines um, for that. So like measles isn't technically confined to just the wintertime. Measles can happen anytime if you're not vaccinated against it. So that would be an example of a yearly based one. They're also concerned with how to control it, obviously. Um, to me, that's like the biggest point of that. There's no reason to know all this information and then not be concerned with how you actually control it. So they can use different kinds of medications and vaccines to control it. You can control uh, human, animal, and non living reservoirs of infection. So if you think about a non living reservoir in the summertime, a lot of people will tell you you need to get rid of puddles of water that are just hanging around your house because mosquitoes can lay eggs in that, and then you increase the mosquito population. So if you just get rid of places where water can just stand, then you can control the um, population of mosquitoes. That would be one way of controlling the reservoirs. Just treating the water, making sure that it's clean, having proper sewage disposal, cold storage for foods, pasteurization of milks and cheeses, food inspections, making sure you're cooking everything the way you're supposed to, making sure your nutrition is good so that your immune system is working well, personal habits such as hygiene is good, and then screening um, blood products, making sure that if you have to have a transfusion or something, that those are all free and clear of microorganisms, and also talking and transplanted organs as well. Just making sure what you can do to control the disease. Then there's what's called case reporting. So in order for them to track when and where the disease is occurring and who it's affecting and things like that, they have to have a chain of transmission and have case reporting. So uh, epidemiologists will try to figure out where something occurred, who's reporting that they have this particular illness, and then you can figure out how to control it a lot better. So local, state, and national health officials are uh, over this. So such diseases as AIDS, measles, gonorrhea, tetanus, and typhoid fever. Um, you have to know who has it and who doesn't. Um, so establishing the chain of transmission for a disease is extremely important. Once known, the chain can be interrupted and slow down or stop the spread of the disease altogether. Um, so case reporting provides epidemiologists with approximation of incidence and prevalence of the disease. Again, how many new cases there are and how many combined cases there are, and that's going to help them decide whether or not to investigate a disease. If there's some crazy disease that emerges and only 5 people in the whole United States have it, they may not take the time uh, to investigate that further. Whereas if it's involved half the population, they're going to make that a priority. So they got to know how many people have it, and then um, that's going to allow them leads or to give them leads on where something started and where it's spreading from, as far as if you work backwards, especially with AIDS. So if you think about AIDS transmitted, if it's transmitted, say, through a dirty needle, then you can say, well, who'd you get that from? Well, who'd you get that from? Well, who'd you get that from? And then you can go back until you figure out who was the person who originally um, um, was the first person that had it, and then you can stop the spread of disease there. So you can apply control measures to stop it from spreading. They may include elimination of a source of infection, isolation and segregation of infected people, development of vaccines, and in the case of AIDS, educating the population. So if you have somebody with tuberculosis, you have to isolate them, otherwise they're going to keep passing on tuberculosis to the next person, to the next person. Um, uh, Developing, obviously, vaccines, so they determined that chickenpox and shingles they didn't want anybody to have anymore. So we got a chickenpox vaccine that people can now get, and they don't have to get chickenpox or shingles anymore. And then educating the public just on how to prevent the spread of AIDS and other diseases as well. So a branch of the U.S. Public Health Service is the CDC, which actually stands for Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. There's no P, don't understand why, kind of bothers me, but whatever, it's the CDC. So they have this publication called Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, which sounds absolutely awful. Surely they could have come up with a different name, but whatever. So let's discuss what those terms mean. So morbidity is the incidence of specific notifiable diseases. So how many times did it occur? And then mortality is how many people died from that disease. So if you say AIDS and you say that there was 5,000 cases, so that would be how many you have, so the incident, how many new cases you have. So you have 5,000 new cases, and say in that particular year, uh, 300 died. So that would be the mortality of that particular disease for that year. So a notifiable disease is one that the U.S. Public Health Service determines needs to be notifiable. They kind of pick random ones. Usually your more infectious diseases, the ones that can spread very easily, are the ones that we're going to keep a close eye on. So those are going to have to definitely be reported. But things such as anthrax, cholera, gonorrhea, malaria, measles, the plague, rubella, smallpox, syphilis, tuberculosis, varicella, which is chickenpox. Anytime somebody comes into the hospital, or even when I was working as the nurse in the clinic, if anybody came in and showed signs and symptoms of, say, chickenpox, I would have to report that to somebody locally, and then they would report that to the state, and then the state reports it to the national part to see where a disease is actually located. So we have to know which diseases are the notifiable ones in order to figure out if we got to tell somebody about it. So morbidity rate, mortality rate is just talking about the number of people that have it in a certain time period, and then the number of people that died during that time period. Again, 5,000 people got the disease in 2012, 300 died from it.